At my birthday party, I saw my mother put ground glass in my glass. The worst part was when the lights danced across the terrace when I saw my mother pour a white powder into my champagne, her hand steady, her smile serene. No one noticed, not the orchestra, not the guests, not even my sister, reaching for her glass beside me. I stood there, my glass warming between my fingers, pretending nothing inside me had shattered. They expected me to swallow it all in silence, just as I'd done with every other silence in this family. Instead, I raised my glass, smiled back at her, and made a decision. Later, people would ask when it truly began. I think it was in that moment, when I chose not to drink. I grew up in a house where silence weighed more than any praise. The walls were decorated with Clara's framed certificates, polished trophies, glossy photos of her beside judges and coaches. My photos were there too, but always lower, always smaller, always slightly crooked, as if the house itself understood the hierarchy. When I was 12, I won the state science fair with a project I built on the kitchen floor while everyone slept. I analyzed water samples from nearby streams, charted chemical runoff on poster board. On the morning I received the results, I remember walking into the dining room holding the blue ribbon like it mattered. Raphael didn't look up from his tablet. Diana kept reading the newspaper. Clara was already dressed for her debate tournament, her hair pulled back exactly how our mother liked. That was expected, Raphael murmured, turning the page. A Valente has to stand out. Expected, not recognized. Diana finally glanced at the ribbon, not at me. Your hair is messy in the photo, she said, smoothing a wrinkle on the tablecloth. Next time, stand straighter. Cameras capture everything. That night, Clara's debate trophy took center stage on the shelf. My ribbon was pinned behind a photo of her in tennis whites. It stayed there for years, half hidden, gathering dust. The pattern never changed. Holidays were planned around Clara's achievements, announcements of high grades, celebrations of internships, the day she received her acceptance letter to a prestigious business school. Every mealtime conversation naturally orbited around her, like water finding its level. My accomplishments were treated as bureaucratic footnotes, facts without applause because they were ordinary. When I applied to study environmental sciences, the whole house shifted. Raphael called it a waste. Diana said no serious person would choose a field with no future. Clara stood silently in the doorway during the argument, eyes sad but quiet. I learned early that compassion without action still feels like abandonment. The summer before college, I took a volunteer internship at an environmental NGO instead of accepting the position in the family company. At breakfast, Raphael read the email where I declined the offer. He placed his spoon down carefully, the metal barely touching the porcelain. If you insist on shaming this family, he said, you'll pay for your own mistakes. I nodded, went upstairs, and filled out the student loan application. The air in my room felt calm, almost grateful, as if it understood something had finally been named. The night before I left, Diana folded my clothes with the same precision she used for Clara's business trips. No words about the future, no hug, not even a lingering look, just a discreet tug on a loose thread at my sleeve cuff, her mouth tightening in silent disapproval. It wasn't cruelty. It was a blade so smooth, so constant, it almost resembled politeness. Looking back, I see clearly now, the empty seats at my events, the way conversations steered away from me, the constant reminder that I was a shadow in a house built to illuminate someone else. It was that day I finally understood my place. The narrow hallway behind the terrace kitchen was lit by a single flickering bulb. I only went back there because the main bathroom was occupied. The air smelled of lemon and heated metal. I was nearly at the service door when I heard my parents' voices, low, sharp, urgent. She can't have access to that fund, Diana whispered. Activated next week, Raphael replied. If she's independent, she can speak about the reports, the samples, the tests. You know what this means? A pause. Then he lowered his voice further. If she's hospitalized, even briefly, the transfer is suspended. And if something worse happens before the paperwork is finalized? Diana inhaled sharply. Raphael, it needs to be precise. A controlled setback. Nothing lethal unless she reacts badly. We need time. That's all. My fingers froze on the bathroom doorknob. A quiet burn spread through my chest, slow, almost methodical, as if my body was protecting me from reacting too fast. They weren't talking about punishment. They were discussing contingency plans. About me. I stepped back before they could turn the corner. The hallway felt colder on the return, as if the entire building had shifted away from me. Back on the terrace, the party blurred into music and laughter. Guests toasted futures they didn't know. Diana's smile was perfect again, her eyes scanning the room for flaws. Raphael stood near the champagne table, speaking with the head waiter in a tone that could pass for pride. When the tray arrived, I watched him select a specific glass, cradling the stem between his fingers, the slight flick of his wrist, the cloudiness settling at the bottom like a secret taking root. He placed it on the family tray and stepped back, as if fulfilling tradition. Clara appeared beside me, tossing her hair back, laughing at some cousin's joke. She didn't see Raphael watching me, didn't notice how his gaze tightened as the waiter approached with the tray. I reached for the glass meant for me, hesitated. My heart didn't. I turned, smiling, the kind of smile that photographs well. Here, I said, offering her my glass. Take mine. It's the best. She didn't question it. She'd never had reason to doubt. She lifted the glass, clinked it gently against mine, and drank. I felt nothing. No shock, no triumph. Just a heavy, quiet certainty settling into my bones. The certainty that whatever comes next had already begun. When Clara's knees gave way, the party didn't stop immediately. First, a murmur near the orchestra, then the clatter of cutlery falling, then the dull thud of the glass rolling across the stone floor. When I reached her, her skin was already pale under the lights, her breathing shallow and uneven. Raphael pushed through the crowd, shouting her name with an urgency he'd never used for me. Diana trembled as she tried to smooth Clara's hair, her voice shaking with disbelief. I knelt beside them, steady, because I had to be. We need an ambulance. No one argued. In the service elevator, Clara's head rested on my shoulder, her pulse racing beneath my fingers. I didn't let my mind go to poison. Not yet. I watched the numbers above the door, listened to the machine's hum, and kept my breath slow. Her glass. My glass. The switch. The powder dissolving into golden liquid. Decisions made in a single breath don't vanish just because the setting changes. At the ambulance entrance, paramedics took her, carrying her inside under fluorescent lights that made everything too clear. Diana followed, pleading for answers. Raphael stayed behind, gripping the railing as if the world had tilted. You switched the glasses, he said, not looking at me. I didn't answer. Silence was safer. In the ER, monitors beeped in uneven rhythm. Nurses moved with efficiency. Dr. Mendez, calm but alert, examined Clara with a focus that left no room for panic. Did she collapse suddenly? Yes. Some symptoms started quickly. Confusion, tremors, tachycardia that won't stabilize. The doctor's eyes narrowed, professional instinct catching something hidden. This looks like exposure to a modified anticholinergic compound, she murmured, almost to herself. My throat tightened. Check for research-grade derivatives, I said quietly. Not commercial ones. The doctor hesitated. Why? Because the man a few feet away has access to compounds no one outside the family labs should handle. Because I saw him pour that powder with the calmness of someone who'd rehearsed it. But I didn't say that. Just check, I asked. She nodded, already giving orders. 20 minutes later, Detective Lopes arrived, notebook in hand. His questions were gentle at first, routine. But when he asked what caused Clara's symptoms, I called Mariana and Julia, still pale from what they'd seen. Mariana handed over her phone. The video played in silence. Raphael selecting the glass, placing it on the edge of the tray, the white powder trickling in, me smiling, switching glasses, drinking the safe one while Clara drank the other. The detective rewound it, watched twice, his expression hardened. I need copies of all recordings. Already in your inbox, Julia replied. I hadn't asked, they just knew. As they walked away with the detective, I sat in a waiting room chair, cold plastic under my hands, the smell of disinfectant, a vending machine humming near the wall, small, neutral, predictable sounds. Safe. They kept me grounded. Raphael and Diana sat across from me. He stared at the floor. She watched Clara's hospital room door. "You misunderstood," Diana whispered, her voice thin. I didn't respond. "We'd never hurt our own family," she said louder, as if volume could make it true. I stayed silent. It was Dr. Theo who came later, his face lined with concern. He'd been at the party, congratulating me with a kindness I rarely received. Now he looked at me like someone piecing together a puzzle they wish they hadn't found. "I heard what happened. If there's anything at all, I can do." "There is," I answered, "but I've already given it to those who can act." He nodded slowly, understanding more than I said. Hours passed. Tests were run. Detectives came and went. Agent Moreira from the Federal Environmental Division entered with a gravity that changed the air. He watched the video, asked about internal access, document histories. I answered with facts, no emotion. The truth was enough. By dawn, Clara was stable, drowsy, confused, alive. I stayed by her bedside, watching her eyes slowly open. "It wasn't supposed to be you," I said softly. She frowned weakly. I didn't explain. She was still fighting the compound's effects. The truth could wait. In the waiting room, the city began to wake. I opened my bag, turned on my laptop. I began the work I'd delayed for years. I entered dates, cross-referenced strange shipment records, hidden memos, copies of water analyses Margarita had saved at the cottage, photos of the West Factory drain, email screenshots, threats disguised as advice. I organized everything into folders: research, environment, fund, corporate acts, family directives. Nothing dramatic, just the truth, structured. I sent a message to Louisa, the lawyer I'd contacted weeks earlier when the house had grown too quiet. "We need to move forward now." I sent it without hesitation. I closed every tab linked to the family name, opened new ones tied to my future, scheduled meetings with federal investigators, downloaded encrypted copies, deleted server access, worked until sunrise, the room empty except for the cleaning crew. When I stood, the weight I'd carried for years felt lighter. Not gone, but released. I looked down the hall where my parents spoke with their lawyer. Distant, small, contained. For the first time, they weren't the center of the scene. I stepped outside, morning air cold on my face. I whispered to the silence, "This time, I won't fix what they broke." By 10 a.m., the hospital had become an investigation site. Officers guarded the corridor. Agents spoke with nurses. Dr. Mendez showed toxicology results to Agent Moreira. Confirmed. Modified anticholinergic compound. Research grade. Non-commercial. Linked to Valente Laboratories. Agent Moreira flipped through access logs. "You withdrew the compound 3 days before the party. We found a deposit with forged signatures, samples, disposal records, all pointing to an attempt to shift blame." Raphael glared at Diana. "You should have kept your mouth shut." Detective Lopes snapped his notebook shut. "Both of you will be detained pending formal charges." Handcuffs clicked. Ava was taken with them, weak, leaning against the hospital room door. When she saw them pass, she didn't move, didn't speak, just looked at the people who raised her as if seeing strangers. Raphael turned to me. "Was it you?" "No," I said. "It was you." Diana reached out a trembling hand. "Daughter, please." Ava pulled back. She didn't need to say a word. The distance was her verdict. When they were led away, the hallway seemed wider, the air lighter. No triumph, just space. Clean, empty, where their shadows used to be. Agent Moreira handed me a card. "We'll need your cooperation." "You'll have it." He nodded. "Justice begins with clarity. You've given us that." Later at the cottage, the world woke in layers, mist, faint light, the outline of the lake. I sat on the steps with my coffee, letting the cold touch my skin. After months of sirens and trials, the silence felt almost sacred. Clara walked slowly, still weak. Sometimes she'd come sit with me, wrapped in my sweater, staring at the water. She'd traded suits for simple t-shirts. Her hair, once tightly pulled back, now fell loose. She looked like someone stepping out of a role they didn't know they were playing. My days had a new rhythm. I worked with an environmental restoration group, conducting assessments, planning cleanups, using what I'd learned to heal, not hide. Reports came in, accounts frozen, soil being restored, testimonies from former employees. I read them all without celebration. It was like finally understanding a language I'd only ever heard through closed doors. Closure isn't loud, it's administrative, calm, real. One afternoon, I walked to the dock, dry leaves underfoot, the lake reflecting the last sunlight. My reflection in the water looked older, but lighter. The terrace party felt distant, like a film I'd studied, not lived. The glass, the powder, the choice. I remembered it all clearly, but the urgency had passed. In its place, something else remained. Not forgiveness, not victory, liberation. Inside, I found Clara in the kitchen, organizing law school materials. She smiled, tired but real. For the first time in months, her eyes were free of fear. "There's still a lot ahead," she said. "I know, but now it's different." "It is." A soft breeze lifted the edge of a notebook. She pressed it down with her palm, steadied the page. We stayed there, in silence. The kind of silence that demands nothing, hides nothing, the kind that, at last, feels like ours. I used to think survival meant being small, quiet, shaping myself into the form that kept peace. Now, on the dock, with the lake lapping at the shore, I understand something simpler. Distance isn't abandonment, it's recovery. Truth doesn't need an audience to matter. It only needs space to exist. My family taught me how silence can wound. Life taught me how it can heal. And between those two shores, I've found a boundary that finally holds. What comes next won't be loud or triumphant. It will be mine. And at last, that's enough.